Long haul truckers, what's the creepiest, most paranormal thing you've seen on the road at night? Maybe a bit off the mark, but it still scared the crap out of me. I was headed west on I-76 here in Denver, just cruising along at about 70 mph. Out of nowhere, I saw a massive, almost solid cloud of what looked to be dirt coming at me. I'd say it was at least 20 feet wide and 10 feet tall. I scanned ahead of me, but couldn't see any vehicle it could have came from. With nowhere to go, I slowed down and took the hit, hoping there wasn't anything big enough in there to come through the windshield or jack up my truck owner-operator. It was pretty loud as I smashed through it. The instant it hit, I knew it wasn't dirt though. I immediately hit the washers because I couldn't see a damn thing through all of the carnage. My windshield was painted with guts. Turns out it was bees. Freaking huge bees that sounded like rocks when they hit. I can't even imagine seeing that swarm if I was walking. They would kill the crap out of anything in their path. I was driving near Las Vegas at around 3 AM. I had been following a few black SUVs along the highway for a good hour or so. They had Nevada plates that were single digit numbers in order. 12, 3. Suddenly they all pulled off the highway down a dirt path. There was no mile marker or cactus that would indicate a path there. It was just dirt. After pulling off the road, they all turned their lights off. I didn't stick around. It was creepy. According to the DMV website, special license plates are also issued to a number of Nevada law enforcement agencies, state elected officials, and the Nevada congressional delegation. Plate 1 belongs to the Nevada governor. 2 belongs to the lieutenant governor. A good friend of mine told me this story years ago. He is the stereotypical old big bad trucker. I've seen some weird stuff with him while driving in South Texas along the border. He never batted an eye, but while telling me this story he had goosebumps and a concerned expression, which from this guy is about the equivalent of a trembling lip and shit-stained pants. I'll tell this story in the first person as he told it to me. Years ago in the late 90s, I was on my way from the house Central Texas heading to Laredo to pick up a load. It was early morning, around 4 or 5. I had just come off a string of days at home, so I know I wasn't tired. I'm on one of those 2-lane winding roads in the absolute middle of bummed out nowhere when I see something on the side of the road at the edge of my high beams. At first I just thought it was roadkill, as is usually the case. As I get closer, I see that it is roadkill, and there's someone crouching over the deer carcass. I remember thinking either this guy's taking the antlers as a trophy, or he's ducking sick. As I got closer still, I can now see that this guy's eating the ducking deer. He's pulling chunks of meat from the stomach and bringing them up to his face. At this point he stops mid-motion and looks up at me, not at my truck, but at me. He stands up, and that's when I see that it's ducking huge, brown, and covered in hair. I remember thinking at this point, oh duck. This thing is standing on the tiny shoulder looking at me. By this point, maybe 3 seconds have passed, and I'm about to the point in the road he's standing at. I didn't even think of stopping. In fact, I'm starting to lay on it and get the heck out of there. As I'm passing it, it's looking at me. Again, not at the truck. It's looking through the driver's side windshield at me. He obviously has the intelligence to know that there's a driver in here and knows where I'm sitting. As I start to pass him, I can still see its head above the hood of an old needle nose Pete. Old truck design, where the hood goes straight out from the windshield. Known for being tall and difficult to see around. This thing is ducking giant. I remember seeing what looked like human intelligence in its eyes. It scares the shit out of me. Sorry for the wall of text. It's a story worth sharing though. Too long didn't read Bigfoot eating a deer on the side of road. My great uncle was a long haul trucker, and he swears that one time he was driving down the road to see 2 guys pull a rolled up carpet out of the trunk of their car and throw it in the river. Whether that's true or not I don't know, but it's still creepy nonetheless. It was probably true. My friend, his wife, and several neighbors last year saw a large car drive to the river at the end of their street in Indianapolis and dump a girl's body, all in broad daylight at like 2 PM. Of course the car sped away. My friend and another neighbor run up to the side of the river, and it's definitely a woman's body. Said he wanted to throw up, and did later on. This woman had obviously been murdered. They got the license plate, but do not know if the people were ever caught. Edited my grandma to make things better. Edit 2. Some people have stated on here, this is not true. I did a web search on nothing. Blah blah blah. First off, the news does not show up at every crime scene where a body is dumped. Whether you believe me or not, my friend who told me this is not the kind of person to lie, and neither is his wife. He's one of the more outstanding people I know and gives a shit ton of his time to volunteering and helping the public in Indianapolis. I'm not going to ask him about something that was really traumatic just to prove a point on Reddit. So, believe me if you will or not. It's up to you. But do not call it untrue just because you cannot find it in a damn web search. Okay, so here is a spook for you. And to this day I still have no idea WTF. So I was in the VMD area and had a lot of work related sites ranging from downtown Baltimore to Virginia Beach and all around. Friday wrapped up and I hit the road to some social arrangements I had made for the weekend. Spent the weekend with friends out in various parts of VAP. Got dragged off to other places even further out. The usual weekend fun times. It's late Sunday night when I have to leave, or I'm not going to be able to get home in time to start my thankfully late afternoon Monday. I'm fully rested. I didn't do any drinking. I'm not into drugs. On the highway at about 3 AM. In the middle of bumduck nowhere between Roanoke and DC. Absolutely nobody around. I'm cruising along in the left lane simply because nobody else is around. No headlights for the past hour. No tail lights either. No road lamps either. It's dark. It's mildly damp. It's foggy. I have the music up. I'm feeling good. All is fine. And then I just happen to look to the left and there is a ducking dog barking at me. A German Shepherd. In a car passenger seat. Somewhat blue glow from the instruments inside the car. And it's got its face to its window and it's barking its head off at me. I get a good hard look at it, too. Because at first my brain is not registering cop car. Dummy. I'm doing 90 plus in a 75. I promptly have the oh shit moment when the dog, the instruments, the white Crown Vic light bar all click in my brain. After a second hard look, I put my foot on the brakes and start slowing down hard but safe to pull over. I even put my blinker on to start shifting lanes over to the right to pull over because, wait, there is no shoulder on the left side of this road. I look back to my left where there is still no shoulder room for another car, and it's just gone. No trace. I slammed my brakes and stopped in the middle of the ducking highway, flipped on all my light bars and even looked around with my handheld spot. There was nothing. No tail lights, no headlights, no engine sounds, nothing. There are no other tire marks in the damp but mine, and I can see for a nice long distance both ways, too. Nothing. My vehicle had great visibility, and a lot of extra lighting off-road sub with the trimmings. There is no possible way somebody pulled a sneaky, let alone drove that fast on wet sloped grass and rocks on my left side. So, yep, there you have it. Ghost cop and his dog didn't like me speeding, apparently. P. My dad has several stories from hauling logs in Idaho and driving trucks through Utah and Nevada. My favorite is from actually just in his pickup going through Utah. He said there was a light keeping pace with him out in the desert on a moonless night. It kept pace for a minute before it disappeared, and his truck turned off. He stopped and turned it on, and pulled off at the next diner. The folks in the diner called it a common occurrence. The creepiest is when he was hauling logs in Idaho and was coming down from near Coeur d'Alene area during a snowy winter night. He was putting on chains before heading down steep grade and said all of the hair stood up on his body. It felt like there was something watching him. Halfway down the switchbacks he saw a large figure standing on a 20-foot tall embankment. As he got closer it jumped down and the shoulders were as tall as the cab. In a single bound it leaped down and then leaped over to the other side of the embankment. At the time he thought it was a Sasquatch. Now he says it was probably a demon trying to make him crash. He didn't stop to remove the chains until he was well away from the mountain. Whoa, that actually reminds me of a story. I live in Spokane, which is about 45 minutes away from Coeur d'Alene. I was driving back from my aunt's in the dark one night and just hit a massive wall of fog. I turned a corner and a whole herd of deer come running down the road toward me. I slow down a lot so I don't hit them. Then after another few seconds I see a woman standing in the street facing away from me with dirty clothes. The area I was in is known to have meth heads and heroin addicts, so I cracked the window and called out to her and asked if she needed me to call anyone. As soon as I spoke her head whipped around and it looked like she was a burn victim. Huge lidless eyes, no eyebrows, Voldemort nose, and a mouth that looked like it was melted or sewn up or something. Then she ran off into the woods and I drove a lot faster than I should have home. Creepiest. Driving I-40 I-30 through Texas and Arkansas. I would see what looked like animals' faces popping out of the bushes, but longer than a glance proved nothing there. They had just paved the highway, and there was hardly any traffic. I was dead tired. It was super dark. Highway hypnosis, I suppose. Paranormal. When I went to local driving, my route ran near an air reserve base in Indiana, so you'd see planes and helicopters pretty often. One night, about 2 AM, I was headed to pick up another load when I saw a bright green light in the corner of my windshield. It was too low to be an aircraft. It moved pretty slowly, then darted and I lost sight of it behind some trees I drove by. Typical, I saw a UFO shit. But I still think it was just a helicopter or a jet that I saw at the prefect angle that turned after a takeoff. The jet pilots have broken the sound barrier over town a couple times in the past sonic boom, so a jet flying abnormally isn't necessarily out of the realm of possibility. Just batshit crazy. Driving south on I-75 in the winter in Ohio, I witnessed a compact car like a Cobalt or similar get on the on-ramp to merge into I-75 north and lost control. They went sideways, fell at least 6 feet off the ramp, and onto the shoulder of the interstate, landing on all 4 wheels, spun 360 degrees, and then proceeded to merge into traffic like it was ducking nothing. Blew my ducking mind. The CB radio was going ducking nuts for about 5 minutes. Holy shit, who else just ducking saw that? Etc. That last story was somebody driving in real life, like they do in GTA. I drove by a marsh every night when I was going home from work. One night I saw a car pulled over with hazards on. Dude was head to toe covered in blood. No crash, no injury, just covered in blood. Maybe he just had one heck of a bloody nose. I was 23. My newly married husband and I decided driving team would be a fun adventure after college, rather than jumping into the 9-5. I was down in Arizona on a long stretch of nothing about 4 AM when a guy pulled up next to me waving his CB. I never left mine on. Listening to those guys BS was irritating. I turned on my CB and he told me I had a blown tire. I thanked him, figuring I would stop at the next truck stop. He kept harassing me to pull over and check my tire for a good 40 miles. I finally got to a next town and pilot truck stop. Got out and checked my truck. No blown tires anywhere. No clue what that guy would done to me, but so glad I trusted my gut and didn't stop. Not paranormal, but I have plenty of stories as a young woman on the road. Saw a clown staggering down an alley in the city, back facing us, while we were coming to a stoplight at like 1 AM. Looked like he was still blowing balloons or masturbating. Not seeing his face made it more ominous. I'm not sure if it's either really creepy or sad. Maybe he was on his way to abduct children. Or maybe he was blind drunk after a long day. Wow, balloons is a lucky guy. I'm a truck driver in the UK. Was driving through rural Scotland one night going down a country lane. All of a sudden I start to see flashing lights come through the trees. Lights of all colors flashing through the trees and causing some really freaky looking shadows on the road. I'm not a believer of aliens or anything, but my first thought was UFOs. Safe to say I put my foot down and got out of there. Found out the next day it was rave happening in a field, but at the time it didn't half scare me. I was coming back home from a trip from Michigan and I saw these people wearing cult-like robes. One in town, one on a highway, and one in a park, all staring at me. Did you approach the dog park? You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to acknowledge it either. The council would like to see you for our education purposes. Myself and 2 friends had to drive from Laredo, TX to Baton Rouge, LA one night in my Ford van. It was about 2 AM. There is a particularly long and dark section of highway just outside Laredo. No buildings. Towns or lights for about 50 miles. I was in the right lane coming up on a truck and pulled out into the left passing lane. As I was slowly overtaking this long truck, my peripheral vision caught a sudden movement of this big truck towards the right shoulder. I saw the truck was swerving to avoid hitting a person dressed in all white face, whose arms were folded across the chest and eyes were closed as they walked across the highway. I swerved to the left and barely missed this ghostly looking person with my passenger mirror. Can still remember seeing that the eyes were closed. That's how close we came to hitting this person.